Hello YouTube viewers and subscribers. This package of stuff arrived on my doorstep yesterday, all except this prop that I've got strapped to this engine. This is a recent purchase from a very good friend of mine for a very reasonable price, and the reason I got it, let me explain by zooming in. This is actually a YS 45 FS engine. Never had one before. I didn't even know these things were ever made. I know very little about YS engines in general, or YS two-stroke engines in particular, because they didn't really make a whole ton of these things. After doing some research, I did find a review article by Clarence Lee on this, and I'll put a link to that on this video. But as with most YS four-stroke engines, this one is a fuel regulated engine, so it has a fuel regulator. And it also came with this check valve, which is, you have to have this when you're going to run any YS engine that has a fuel regulator, because they create a pressurized fuel system, and this check valve is instrumental in actually making sure that the fuel system gets pressurized. So with that said, this is also one of those butterfly style type carburetors, so it's got a huge intake because of the fact that it's using a pressurized fuel system, so it doesn't have your standard rotating barrel. Now, the review I saw in this engine, it actually showed it with an exhaust, a standard exhaust. What I've got here obviously is a header with a pipe. Now, I've never run one of these engines before, but this thing has, I put this 11.6 prop on here because this was a prop that I had read was a good size for this engine. And I put this on there because I actually could not even turn this over by hand without a prop being on there. That's how much compression this engine has. Let me see if I can zoom in here again and show you the side of this piston, if possible. I mean, yeah, it's dark there. It's got some runtime on it. And I've pulled the glow head out, or the glow plug out, and looked inside, and the top of the piston is a little discolored. So this obviously has some runtime on it. Now, this is in good enough shape that I could just do a box to the bench run on it, which I think is what I'm going to do. The only concern I have with running any YS engine really is this fuel regulator, and that the silicon diaphragm may not be functional. But I think once I get this plumbed up on my stand in a tank, I think I've already checked to make sure this check valve does work, so I know I can pressurize the fuel system, but whether the engine will actually run or not properly is a question. But it came with, this whole package came together for a very reasonable price that I really couldn't turn down, because quite honestly I really wasn't all that interested in this initially unless I could get it for a decent price, which I managed to get it for well under $100 for all of this, so I figured that's a decent price. This engine, the review on this engine dates back to 1988, so as far as I know, this could be a very old, very old engine. So it came with an idle bar glow plug in it, which is what Clarence Lee said he actually ran in his test. He actually ran it with a K&B idle bar glow plug, which was somewhat surprising to me because I wouldn't think it would use an idle bar plug. I'm sure I could probably use any other two-stroke plug, but like I said, I'm going to try and do a box to the bench run with this engine. I've done nothing to anything. I haven't touched, especially the regulator, so I don't know if this is one of those things where somebody bought this thing and ran it a little bit and then they couldn't get it to run properly and then they just gave up on it, or what. You have no idea when you're dealing with used engines, the history of them, unless you're buying it from somebody who's had it from day one, which obviously is not the case here. So I have no idea. All I can tell you is that this engine has incredible compression and it looks to be in overall excellent shape. Now, yesterday when I got this, I did take the back plate off and look inside just to make sure it didn't look really boogered up or anything, and it looked pretty darn good in there. So I just put a little bit of 3-in-1 oil in there and put the cover back on and left it like this, mounted this prop so I could turn it over. honestly, I'm not even sure if my electric starter will be able to turn this thing over. It might. But anyway, that's a quick look at a rather somewhat rare, I'll say, because I've never even heard of them until a couple of days ago and never seen one before. A rather rare YS45 FS two-stroke engine. Stay tuned to see if I can actually get this thing running and how well it runs once I do.